when people say, I have 25 years of experience, so I know exactly what to do. That's false.
If your office job feels safe, it isn't.
Jack Dorsey just laid off 40% of his staff. The company is profitable. He said, nope, AI is coming. We got to learn how to be lean.
If that is happening in successful companies, what does it mean for everyone else? Today's guest has spent 30 years inside the startup ecosystem, co-authoring the literal playbook on how companies scale from 0 to $1 billion with Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn. And he has a very clear answer.
The thing that people mistakenly believe about a corporate career is that it's safe.
We get into why 25 years of experience might be working against you.
Sense of safety you can get within a corporation. But the thing is, it's an illusion.
The concept of unlearning.
Can you unlearn the lessons of your past success when they no longer apply?
How to start a business while you're still employed.
How will you know when it's time to quit your job? When you can't.
Chris is breaking down exactly how to think about your career like a startup.
There are a couple more things that I think people don't think about as much that I believe are super important. So the first is
I just want to start with a little bit more about you. And I'm just interested before the books, before all the startups, who are you and what was your goal in life?
Well, that's an excellent question. It's something where, this is not necessarily where I expected my life to end up. And like most of us, when I was growing up, I was a child who did a lot of reading. We didn't have iPads and iPhones and things back in those days. The big thing that kids would do is go to the library or go outside and play. And so I always loved reading books, both fiction and nonfiction. And so I did think that maybe someday I would be a writer or a professor and teach or write. But I didn't know that I would do anything in the world of business. I really didn't follow it that closely at all. If you may remember, back in those days, people read physical newspapers, and they would have, headline section and a local section and a business section and a sports section. And of course, like anyone reading the newspaper, I would look over the headlines and then skip to the sports section and the comics and read those instead. So I really didn't know that this was the way my life was going to go. But what I did do, like I said, is just read a lot. And so that's how I came to love storytelling. That's how I came to love communicating. And those are the things and threads that ended up becoming a big part of my life today.
You have a portfolio career. This is how I call it. So can you tell me all your portfolio? Because I read a lot about you, but there's so many things.
Well, that's also a great point. So I have been talking about living a portfolio career or a portfolio life for over 20 years because I think a lot of us, we feel like there are so many things in life we want to do, and the world just wants us to focus on one thing. And of course, we can listen to the world or we can do what we actually want to do. So I have been pursuing this sort of portfolio life for a long time. A large part of it is also if you're a founder or entrepreneur, you're taking a tremendous amount of risk. And I spent the first half of my career as a founder or entrepreneur. Each company that you start, there's a maybe 10 to 20% chance that it succeeds. And so you're undergoing a tremendous amount of risk. And so having a portfolio life where you have other bets on the table is the same kind of diversification that the venture capitalists and angel investors who invest in you have. So it's only fair to have some degree of diversification. So that's something that I've really focused on throughout my life. Now, the best way to think about it is that my portfolio life and my portfolio career are divided up into the different things that I'm really interested in. So one part of what I do is the traditional startup world. And that's because one of the things I love is the fact that we're creating new things that didn't exist before. So that kind of innovation, that kind of creativity has always appealed to me. It was something that appealed to me even before I knew I was going to be in this world. Because when I was in college, I focused and studied on creative writing and product design, both of which are really creative endeavors. So the biggest part of my career is really in that startup world. It began on the operational side, morphed into becoming a founder and entrepreneur, and today has me as a venture capitalist with blitzscaling ventures. And so that's the biggest part of it, because that's the part that the world is generally most willing to pay for, because we can do whatever we want in life, but we also have to find a way to support ourselves. But then the other piece of it is the writing and storytelling, something that I've always enjoyed. And I've had the great privilege to get a chance to do that professionally as well. As most people know, I write books with my friend Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn. Our most famous book is Blitzscaling, but we've written a number of other ones as well. We're working on a sequel to Blitzscaling right now. And that's been a lot of fun because I get to live out my childhood dream of being a writer. And that includes not just the writing and thinking, which of course is tremendously rewarding in and of itself, but also speaking to audiences, traveling around the world to appear on stages. And that's also something that's really, really fun for me. You may recall I did creative writing, but the other thing I did when I was at Stanford is I also taught public speaking. And I was also part of an improv comedy group that performed at college comedy festivals. So being on stage is something that I really enjoy as well. So I'm really happy to be able to have those things in my career in addition. And then the last thing, I'm not sure if it's really part of my career, but you can think of it as part of my career. It's at least career adjacent, is that I do a lot of mentorship. I have always just gotten a lot out of working with others. Even when I was young, in my 20s, I enjoyed, working with children and things like that. And now, of course, I'm much older. And so the people I work with tend to be much older. But I love getting a chance to help entrepreneurs do special things and to help guide them and listen to them and help them. Because entrepreneurs are taking on this tremendous risk. They're the ones who power our entire ecosystem, and they deserve our support. So whether that's working with them one-on-one, working with them as a part of a structured mentorship process, like I do with organizations like the Unreasonable Group or the Women's Startup Lab or the INSEAD Venture Lab, or coming on podcasts like this and recording something that hopefully entrepreneurs are going to hear and take away and leverage in their lives.
Talking about entrepreneurs and corporate professionals, you said entrepreneurs take risks, absolutely. And there was this perception that corporate career is safe.
That is a false perception, yes.
Exactly. I think that today corporate career is as risky as entrepreneurship, if not more, because entrepreneurs have, if that idea doesn't work out, they'll go to that or this. Wow, in corporate world, it just you're laid off and you suddenly wake up and think, oh my goodness, what I'm going to do. So if you're in a corporate and you're sitting there, you have 20 years of experience, what should you worry about the most at this moment of time?
So I do want to preface this by saying I have not had a corporate career. So I've never worked in an organization that had more than 1,000 employees when I was there. And so my experience with the corporate world is somewhat limited, but I feel like I do have a good sense of it from having worked with corporations and people at corporations over the years. So I think that a lot of this can be summed up in one of the books that my friend Reid Hoffman wrote with my other friend, Ben Casnocha. It's called The Startup of You. And it basically said, look, even if you're in a corporate career, you are like a startup CEO. It's just that the company that you're running is your own career. And you have to think entrepreneurially, even when you're inside a larger organization. The thing that people mistakenly believe about a corporate career is that it's safe. But what is less mistaken is that, okay, within the boundaries of a single company, it is a little easier to figure out the rules, figure out the lay of the land, figure out what are the things you need to do to succeed, and then figure out how to actually do that. It's kind of like being in school. When you're in school, you're going through different, primary, secondary, tertiary, college, university, etc. Each time it's different, but each time you eventually, at least for me, figure out a set of rules and figure out roughly how things work. And then you go ahead and you perfect yourself over time. And there's that sense of safety you can get within a corporation. But the thing is, it's an illusion. The reason it feels like that at the college or university level is because you're only at any of those given levels for 3 to 4 years. There's no time for the circumstances to change. Life as a college student is very different today for my daughter than it was when I was a college student.
Yeah.
So I think that if you're in the corporate world, if you've been there for 20 years, you need to reflect on the fact that things are different now than they were when you first started, and that things will be different in 20 years from now, even if you stay at that corporation. And so you need to begin the process, not just of figuring out the rules and figuring out the strategies to follow, but the process I would call unlearning. So we have a concept called being an infinite learner that we talk about a little bit in blitzscaling. It basically means, can you unlearn the lessons of your past success when they no longer apply? And so you need to have the courage to look at the situation around you with realistic eyes, to decide what is working and what is no longer working, especially in a world where new technologies like AI are changing things so rapidly.
Yeah.
And to be willing to unlearn the lessons of your past success in order to have room for those new lessons.
If, again, a corporate professional decides to start a business, what are the skills that are transferable, and what are the things they should focus learning the most so they can be successful?
Yeah. So the skill that is most transferable is just the ability to relate to other people. This is something that's going to be just as important when you're running your own business as when you're in the corporation. It's just works a little bit differently. Instead of bosses, you may have customers or investors or things like that. But you still need the ability to figure out what people want and to make it so that getting what they want also gets what you want. And so that is the core function of working with others in general. Now, the big difference, of course, is that you're doing it in a scenario where the default is you're going to fail. And this is tough for entrepreneurs to accept, but it is absolutely true. If you look at the number of companies that get started and the number that ultimately succeed, either being acquired for a huge amount of money or going public, it's a small fraction. Whereas if you're working at an established company, the default is the company's going to be there the next year. And so you have to be much more proactive or even aggressive, if you will, because the default is you're going to lose versus the default being things are going to go okay. There are some, probably not your listeners, but there are some who will have a corporate career where they're just quietly getting by, where they're just going with the flow and they're performing at a 75th percentile level and getting steady raises and rolling along year after year. And that may feel safe. But as you point out, they could be laid off at any time. Block, for example, Jack Dorsey just laid off 40% of his staff. The company is profitable, cash flow positive. He said, nope, AI is coming. We got to learn how to be lean. That's something that could happen to any of us. And so what you need to do instead of having that, I'm just steadily rolling along, is to always be thinking, okay, what can I do to be more valuable? What can I do to be more productive? What can I do to learn the new rules that are going to allow me to succeed?
Is it, when you say, I'm so experienced, I sometimes wonder, should I say that I have 25 years banking experience? What does it mean? Is it going to be, am I going to be seen in a positive light or not?
Well, that experience is a dual-edged sword, and it's what you make of it. When it becomes a negative is when people say, I have 25 years of experience, so I know exactly what to do. Well, that's false. That is a belief where you are fetishizing your experience and saying, because I have had more experience, I know more than you. And, I've heard people express this sometimes in the startup world. Somebody will say, listen, I've been doing this for 25 years. Just listen to me. Just trust me. And my response to that is always, well, can you explain why? Can you tell me why this is the right course of action? Because I got to tell you, you should be able to explain it to me. Otherwise, you're just going off gut feeling. And I have no reason to believe that your gut feeling is applicable today in the same way that it was 25 years ago. Look, 25 years ago, there was no iPhone. Most people were on dial-up. Is that world the same as the world we live in today? I don't think so. So I think that experience is generally a positive. It is a potential asset. But to unlock that asset, people have to say, listen, I have this tremendous experience. I also recognize that the world is constantly changing. And so this bank of experience allows me to compare what is happening now to things that have happened in the past. Doesn't mean they're going to match exactly, but it gives me ideas. It gives me different angles and lenses that I can use. But at the same time, I am not bound to the past. The past doesn't necessarily repeat itself. History will rhyme, however, and I can leverage the experiences I've had in the past to help figure out those rhymes.
Yeah. So it's like a pattern recognition, because
pattern recognition, but then with the ability to decide, does this pattern actually match? The fact that it looks similar doesn't mean that it matches. Let's look at the underlying principles and figure out if they apply or not.
Let's talk about AI a little bit. There is no discussion without AI these days, because it's
so it would seem.
Everybody's saying AI is going to change everything. Some people are saying, well, it will be in the next 2 years, next 5, 10. So according to you, where are we? I mean, what is it? Is it 2, 5? What is the realistic view?
Yeah. So first of all, nobody really knows. What I will say is that we're going to undergo tremendous transformation because of AI, similar to the way that we underwent tremendous transformation due to the internet or to mobile or all these other things that affected our daily lives. I mean, if you look back and say, did the internet transform how we do things? The answer is yes. If we go back to the pre-internet, people would go to Sears and Kmart and buy things, and now they go to Amazon. That life is totally different. They would go to Blockbuster to rent videotapes, and now they have Netflix and HBO Max and all these streamers. So our lives have changed. But in many ways, they're similar. We're still buying the same kinds of stuff. We're still trying to watch movies or television shows or maybe a YouTuber or something like that. But these are all feeding in the same basic human needs and desires. So I think that we have to be careful about saying it's going to transform everything. That creates a picture of like a science fiction world where now we're all in flying cars. And a lot of people have said, where are my flying cars? I'm like, well, your life is still so much different, so much better than it was before. Let's look at that kind of progress instead. However, what's different about AI is it's really kind of unprecedented for us to have a technology that can basically enhance itself. And we are getting closer and closer to the point where AI can advance AI. In fact, all the AI research labs are heavily using AI to help them make AI more powerful than before. So the big question is, will it get to the point where it just becomes so powerful that it really transforms our lives, the sort of super intelligence thing? I haven't seen evidence that we're going to get there yet, but I don't doubt that it's possible. So I would say for the next couple of years, focus on adapting to AI and figuring out how to incorporate it in your life. Don't worry about the Terminator future yet, or don't quit your job and start saving for retirement like Elon Musk has advised us to do. But over the long term, I think that we all have to be prepared for a very different world. I think we have to do a variety of things. It's not just a question of like saving money and feeling we know more. It's also a question of just keeping ourselves mentally flexible to be able to recognize that the rules could change yet again.
So they're prepared for the next 5 years, for the next 10 years.
Yes. So there are several things, and there's the specifics right now. And then there's just the general principles of learning. So the specific right now, and I think most people are starting to get this, but it's to try using this new technology, AI, in their lives and not just view it as this thing that a lot of people don't like AI. They don't like the changes that it might bring. Guess what? It's going to come no matter what. And so you are better off getting personal experience with it, not just reading stories about it, but using it directly. And I often joke and say, even the smallest, dumbest things can be really important. Like, for example, what I tell people is I travel a lot. And one of the things I hate is going into a hotel and not knowing how the damn shower works. Right? We've all experienced this. It's like, wait a minute, how does this work? I'm like, hey, you know what? When you do that, just take a photograph with your phone and ask ChatGPT, your favorite AI, how do I turn on the hot water? And a surprising amount of time, it will actually tell you. right? There are all these things where we now have the ability to improve our lives or do just about anything. I see this happen all the time. I'll be in a meeting with a startup, an AI startup, and they'll say, oh, we're trying to figure this out. And like, have you asked AI yet? Just get in the habit of being AI first. Now, not AI only, mind you. So next week, for example, I'm going to be doing a fireside chat with my friend and co-author, Reid Hoffman, about AI in the future. We're going to be doing this in front of an audience of very important people. And so I'm going to be the interviewer. And I said, okay, well, ChatGPT, I'm Chris Ye, the author and investor, and I'm going to be interviewing my co-author, my friend Reid Hoffman, the legendary investor and entrepreneur. And we're going to be talking about how AI is going to transform companies. What are some of the ideas, the questions I should ask, especially if I want to focus on the second or third order implications of AI, the things that people aren't talking about now. And I came up with a whole bunch of stuff, but I didn't just take that and cut and paste and say, okay, job done. And I looked through it and I took, maybe about 30% of it and I added my own stuff in and used it as a way to help me get started. Otherwise, I would have had to generate it from scratch. AI providing me these ideas allowed me to react to them, gave me the ability to think more interesting ideas on my own. And so to me, that is a great example of how AI works. I'll give you another example. How do you mix AI and intelligence? I think I have one on the bookshelf behind me.
Yep.
So this is an interesting thing. This is a book that I wrote on becoming a venture capitalist. I wrote it in 12 hours by leveraging AI. Now, half of the words are mine, half of the words are AI. Obviously, I'm leveraging my own expertise. I think if somebody who didn't know anything about the topic asked AI to write a book, they would get a pretty bad result. But when someone who's an expert leverages AI, doesn't just use it as a substitute for thinking, but uses it as a way to amplify thinking, and you can get incredible productivity as a result.
Mm-hmm. What are the things about AI that worry you?
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious.
So there are a variety of things. There are the obvious ones that I think most people know about, which is AI can be used to generate misinformation, which is really dangerous in a society driven by information. AI and the power that AI provides is highly concentrated in a relatively small number of hands that are not guaranteed to be benevolent. So those are certainly dangers as well. But I think the one that I want to highlight for folks, just because it is the one that they can personally actually do something about, is how we ourselves use AI, or how our children or people around us use AI. So the thing about AI is that you can use AI to think more or to think less. And one of the great dangers is using AI to think less. So when we think about school, for example, kids everywhere are using AI to help them with their homework. They used to have to write a book report, which was an experience that many of them found miserable. Now AI can do that for them. But does that actually cause them to learn anything? So schools measure students on their ability to, write papers and fill out midterms and things like that. That's because that's the easiest mass-produced way to actually measure ability. But it doesn't measure ability when AI can provide you with all the answers. What AI should be doing instead is helping you develop understanding. And so as you yourself use AI, the critical thing you need to do is to ask yourself, am I just using AI to get an answer? Or am I using AI to help me develop my own understanding even better? Because if you're using AI to think less, that's the mistake. You should be using AI to think less about the things that don't actually help, that are routine, that are boring, that are tedious, so that you can spend more time on the novel, the interesting, the challenging, so that you develop a greater understanding.
You were talking just now, and generally everybody's speaking about lifelong learning. But I don't think a lot of people understand what that means and how to do it actually. What is it and how to do it? Can you shed a light on that?
Absolutely.
What is your approach?
So my approach is fairly simple, which is I want to understand the world around me. And that natural curiosity is what powers learning. If you say, I'm going to learn, and learning is the objective, it's going to be difficult to stick with it because, you are probably not learning things that are interesting to you. And the mistake that people often make is they focus on learning. Like, I have to learn the things that other people think are important. I'm like, yes and no, right? In order to develop that love of learning, you have to learn the things that you care about. And that will help power your practice of learning, which you can then use to learn the things that maybe you don't immediately think are the most interesting, but which can help develop your abilities over time. So when I look at the world around me, I'm always trying to understand why it works the way it does. And then I try to learn the actual mechanisms behind it. This can be in a number of ways. Obviously, we have traditional school. You can read a book. But now we also have the option of leveraging AI, asking AI to help teach us about a topic. So all those things are critical. But then the thing that people often forget is that learning is not just purely an individual endeavor. In fact, one of the things that happens in schools that actually works is that we and our classmates are studying the same thing at the same time. We can talk about it with each other. We can see other people's understanding and use that to improve ours and vice versa. So I think a big part of that lifelong learning is not just, these are the materials I'm going to seek out, but it's to seek out other people along the way who can be learning companions who are also interested in those things. And so a big part of what I do when I learn is I go and I talk to people and I seize those opportunities when they arise. So let me give you an example that's going to happen today. A couple of weeks ago, I spoke at an event that was organized in part by YPO, the Young Presidents Organization. This was during the Super Bowl, which took place about a month ago. And I was a part of a panel talking about investing in sports. And as a part of that, I also got to meet a lot of the attendees. And one of them was somebody who had gone through the Distinguished Careers Institute at Stanford, which is an amazing program for people who are thinking, hey, I've had an incredible career. What's my legacy? What's going to happen next? And so I've always said, maybe that's something I want to do someday. So when I met this fellow, I said, let's get together. Let's have coffee. I want to learn about what your experience was like. And so, of course, we had busy schedules and everything, but we were able to ultimately be able to set up a time and we're going to have coffee today. You have to seize these learning opportunities where you can. It's not just a question of picking up a book or taking a course. It's also finding someone who's been through an experience and talking with them. And by the way, if you enjoy talking with interesting people, that's going to make your learning a lot more natural.
That's why I love this podcast, because I get to talk to a lot of people that I would normally not see around or meet. So it has been amazing. Again, on AI, I just wanted to know your opinion about AI regulation and what do you think is the right approach? Because it seems the view from the US and from the tech world is that we should not have regulations. And that Europe is too regulated, etc. What is the, maybe not the right, because who knows who the right approach is, but what is like a reasonable approach here?
Well, to cite one of the greatest Greek thinkers of all time, we need to be a little more Aristotelian about this and seek out a golden mean. One of the things that is true is that it can be dangerous to regulate new technologies too tightly. And that's because the lawmakers themselves don't understand the technologies. They impose regulations that don't necessarily make sense. You may remember a couple of years ago, there was a movement, a sort of, if you will, manifesto that a lot of people, including Elon Musk, signed calling for a moratorium on AI research. And that moratorium was built around the number of parameters and things like that. And of course, that ultimately failed. And of course, during that whole time, Elon Musk was secretly buying chips and building his own AI. And what that tells us is, yes, we need potentially some kind of regulation, but we have to do it in an intelligent way. Now, the counter to that is there should be no regulation. There's not regulating it in China. Therefore, we have to not regulate it. Let us go as quickly as possible. And I'm like, you're basically just sort of saying, hey, just trust us. we're going to do the right thing. And I'm like, I don't think you really have a lot of credibility with the public on that one. And this is the thing about new technologies. Ultimately, the great thing is that we live in democracies. And the fundamental thing about a democracy is that each person vote counts roughly the same. And that therefore you need to get people to believe in what you're doing, get people on board. This doesn't always work out. As we know, there are certain events happening in the world right now where a US president, for example, might be doing things that are unpopular, including unpopular with the American people. That's not a good thing. But what I would say is that what you can do is you can find ways to have people feel like they are, in fact, their voices are being heard. They're being involved in this process. I think that the key is not, hey, we have a central set of regulators who don't really understand the problem, just arbitrarily creating regulation for the sake of regulation, but rather we have the people who are leading the industry really being open and talking with everyone, including the public, but also, of course, the lawmakers, about what are the reasons behind things, and not just hide behind the same arguments of, well, China, therefore you have to let us go, but rather to say, listen, we are building one of the most powerful technologies that has ever existed. We want to make sure that this makes society better. We're trying to manage these risks as best we can, and the more people who are thinking about this, the better.
But is this going to happen is the question. Are we going to
succeed? Well, that is... you asked what should happen. You didn't ask what will happen.
Exactly. All right. So let's go to entrepreneurship. Starting a company, the barrier to entry has never been lower. You can basically start your company with your computer, social media account, and an idea. That's it. But the thing is the idea. So how do you get these ideas? How you work with so many startups? How do people come to these absolutely amazing ideas and build these amazing companies?
Well, I will give you my advice on how to do it. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best way to do it, but it is a more systematic way of doing it. So the thing that most people do is they look for a problem in their own life that they would like to solve. And this isn't a bad approach, because guess what? If you tackle a problem that you personally care about solving, then usually you're going to make something pretty good. I'll give a great example. There is a fellow named AJ who created a service called Junova, JUNOVA.ai. He's actually a very successful, long-standing person in Silicon Valley, but he created this AI-based service that all it does is you forward your emails from the airlines to it after you've booked your travel, and when they drop the prices of their tickets, it gets you a refund, or rather flight credits. Simple, straightforward, but super helpful, because I never got any flight credits before. I mean, you buy the ticket. Do you ever go back and look and check and see if they lowered the price? And if they did you do anything about it? This just does it. And that's great. But, it is intentionally a lifestyle business. He understands this is not something that's $1 trillion business. It's just something that's really useful. And I think that a lot of times when you're solving the problems in your own life, it can fit into that category. Maybe it's valuable, maybe it's not. Maybe it's broadly applicable, maybe it's not. And this is especially a problem for young people, because young people will go ahead and they will build the products that matter to them, which means they'll build some sort of food delivery service or some sort of dating app or doing all these different things. And there are certain markets that are therefore wildly overpopulated. Now, the thing that I recommend people do, and it's easier for folks who've actually been out and had some experience and worked, is to find a market, an audience, a set of buyers that you really want to help, and then go and observe them very closely. And it could be from your own experience. My own professional experience, a lot of it was on the marketing side. So I thought a lot about the sort of marketing issues that need to be solved. But it doesn't have to be, something you directly experience. One of the things I learned at Stanford when we studied product design is how do we empathize with other people? and their problems? How do we conduct deep research into the obstacles they actually face rather than the assumptions we have about them? And so if you deeply study and care about a particular audience, I think you'll find problems that you can solve for them. And then you filter those problems to figure out which ones are the most valuable to solve.
So everybody's talking about the first billion-dollar company that will be one person and all AIs. Is that realistic kind of talk or just imagining things?
So I think that there are elements of realism there, but I'll paint the scenario that I think is more likely, which is, I just described to you a company like Junova, which has the ability to generate revenues, perhaps not be a billion-dollar company, but fill a niche and be able to make things happen. It's something that's built by a single individual who launched it. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I think it's quite possible that there will be one-person conglomerates even, where one person is out there solving these problems, building these AI-based services, putting them out there. The services are not going to necessarily, generate revenues for 30 or 40 years. They might generate for a few years, and then maybe they fade out. But I think it's quite possible to, as a one-person band, build out a real set of businesses around you that are generating revenues and profits and helping support you. I think that if you want to build something that's a billion-dollar company, that's a lot harder. There are clearly examples. Just recently, we had the creator of OpenClaw go to OpenAI for a package that was approximately $1 billion. That's a one-person company that's worth $1 billion. However, that's a one-person company that's also a movement, a community, all these other things. It's not as simple as just sort of saying, oh, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to build vibe code one project, and it's going to be worth $1 billion. That's pretty unlikely.
Yeah, because for any company, there's just situation that happen, COVID or war or anything else. How can one man company with all AIs solve such a situation?
It's very difficult. Although I will say a one-person company that has a bunch of AIs can probably adapt more quickly to a situation. Like if you have a 1,000-person company, you need to shift to completely virtual, and you need to shift to a new COVID style of working, and shift everything from renting out individual rooms to renting out entire homes in rural areas. That's hard to do with people. It's easier for a startup than a big company, but even a large startup's going to have trouble. A one-person company can effect that shift instantaneously. So there are potentially benefits, but like I said, I think that we are not going to live in a world where I look at the top of the stock markets and I see the top 5 names and each of them is run by a single person with no help.
Yeah. Okay. So if somebody, again, I'm going back to the corporate professional, they want to start a company.
Yes.
What are the steps? What should they do to kind of, and they don't know anything about entrepreneurship. Where to start?
Well, I think that there have been a lot of great books written about entrepreneurship. There is an old book that must be almost 30 years old now that I've always referred people to, called The Art of the Start by Guy Kawasaki, who's a very famous influencer. And it's actually a very good book, and he does a great job. Of course, again, it's 20 to 30 years old, but I think it's evergreen content. But I think the other element of it is it's very easy to go to AI and ask AI, hey, what are some of the things I should be thinking about? Here's my particular situation. And you can get customized, personalized advice that's different than, what a single book can tell you, because a book has to necessarily serve everyone. The other thing I would say is, if you are somebody who has been in a corporate career for a long time, and now you're looking to start a company, you do have an advantage, which is you understand how things work within your organization and within your industry. And you should be looking to find the problems within your organization and industry that you can solve. These are problems that a 22-year-old graduate from Stanford won't understand and won't be tackling. So you'll have a better shot of being able to build something interesting and useful than if you were, starting out when you were 22. But I do want to offer this additional advice, which is not to quit your job right away. Of course, you have to make sure that what you do is compatible with your job from an intellectual property standpoint. You have to make sure you haven't signed an employment contract that says that whatever you come up with, the company owns. You should make sure you don't use company equipment to do this, especially. But the fact is that when you've been working for a long time, you often have expenses. You're used to making money. And if you quit your job right away, you're going to rapidly discover that money disappears pretty quickly if you keep spending the way you did before. And so starting your company while you're still employed somewhere else is, I think, a great way of managing the runway. And how will you know when it's time to quit your job? When you can't stand not being able to work on your company full time. And I went through this process myself in my career, and I had to make that, clear, decisive move when it was time to leave my job and focus on the startup. And I generally felt pretty certain by the time I did that. I didn't feel uncertain. I was like, oh, maybe I should do this. Maybe I shouldn't. I'm like, nope, now's the time. And it may not work out, but that doesn't mean it's the wrong decision. Now is the right time, and I have the confidence to do this.
So you've been, again, investing and working with startups. And you said 10 to 15% of startups actually succeed. So what are the characteristics of people who have these companies, and what do they do right?
Yeah. And by the way, if I had the ability to know which 10 to 15%, then I would only invest or help those. And so clearly I don't know the real answer here, but I will attempt one anyways.
Yeah.
So what I find is there are a couple of things that everyone just assumes are important, right? You want people to be intelligent and hardworking and able to persuade people. Those are, of course, givens. Those are always going to be helpful. But there are a couple more things that I think people don't think about as much that I believe are super important. And those are the things I want to highlight. So the first is something that touches on what I've been discussing before in terms of product design and understanding customers. I feel like people who have a user or customer orientation and who really feel empathy for the people they're trying to build something for are much better off. I think that it is so important to understand what they want and also to be motivated to build something that solves their problems. So I think that those kinds of entrepreneurs often succeed. I encounter a lot of them when I work with the Unreasonable group because it's social impact and people are building companies they believe in. And I'm always struck by how many of them are able to succeed. And again, some of them fail. There's no guarantee of success, but a lot more of them succeed than I would necessarily expect. And I think part of that is because they really care about the people that they're serving. The second thing is something I also described, which is the ability to unlearn the lessons of past success, to be able to shift and change along the way. And you can see this in the example of somebody like a Reed Hastings of Netflix. So Reed Hastings starts Netflix and it becomes a successful publicly traded company by mailing DVDs to people. But that's not what Netflix does today. Netflix shifted from DVDs to streaming. So all of a sudden, instead of mailing you these DVDs with movies on them, they would stream it to you directly. And that was great. But that wasn't where Netflix stopped either. Netflix then went from there and said, well, instead of just licensing movies from all the existing studios, we're going to create our own content. And Netflix has continued to evolve because at each point in time, Reed Hastings and the leadership that succeeded him, people like Ted Sarandos, have said, we are willing to unlearn the lessons that have made us successful in the past because we think that there's an even bigger opportunity in the future. And if Netflix was still mailing DVDs, first of all, it'd be out of business. And second of all, there would be no K-pop demon hunters.
So you're talking about blitzscaling, but do you anticipate which companies will be able to do that?
We do our best. Absolutely. What we do is we look for the key things that those companies need to be able to successfully blitzscale. And there are two things that really stand out. Now, there's a bunch of things that are important, like product market fit and having a large market and high gross margins and being able to scale up the operations in the organization. But those are true of every business. Every successful business that achieves scale is going to require those things. And so blitzscaling is something else. It's achieving scale much faster than normal. And so for that to be true, we look for two other things. The first is a winner-take-most market dynamic. The whole reason to take on the risk of blitzscaling is to win a winner-take-most market that once you win it, it's very difficult for anyone to take it away from you. That's the reason you do it. You're willing to invest more now to reap the benefits of market leadership over time. And so we look for network effects that are going to drive those kinds of dynamics. We look for land grab effects where once you get the customers, they can never leave you. And then the other thing we look at is the go-to-market. Because if the market is a winner-take-most market, you're not the only one who can go after it. Are you going to be able to outgrow the competition and be the one who gets to that finish line first or not? And there we're looking for evidence that their go-to-market strategy is working, that they have something other people don't have. Maybe they have virality. Maybe they have better distribution partnerships, but they need to be some reason why they're going to be the ones that actually win that market.
By the way, how do you know Reid Hoffman?
Well, Reid and I met back when he was starting LinkedIn. So when LinkedIn was launched, I thought, wow, this is such a brilliant idea. In fact, I've been thinking about things along those lines for some time because I was out there in Cambridge, Massachusetts, really feeling the lack of connection with Silicon Valley. And I thought, this would be incredible to have a service where you can really connect with people. And so I looked up the founders of LinkedIn, saw they were all Stanford alumni like me, and I just reached out to them and said, hey, I really like what you're doing. And I gave them suggestions. And then the first time Reid and I met is when I set up a Harvard Business School alumni event to inform them about LinkedIn. Because back then there were so few LinkedIn users, it was worth it to have Reid Hoffman go and speak to 200 Harvard Business School alumni to tell them why they should sign up for LinkedIn. And so that's how we met, and we stayed in touch. Reid was angel investing, as was I, and I pitched him on one of my companies, which he wisely passed on, even though it ended up being pretty successful. It was not successful to the extent of, Facebook, PayPal, and the like. And then, years later, probably 2011 or so, we started working together on writing these various books.
I see. So in startups, who then become like Uber and Airbnb, etc. What happens in that blitzscaling stage? I'm just very curious. I've never been, or never even, I don't even know anyone who had this experience.
Well, it's both tremendously exciting and also incredibly challenging and frightening at the same time. Obviously, everyone is excited about the prospect of rapid growth. If I tell a room full of entrepreneurs, how would you like your company to grow 1,000x over the next 5 years? They're like, yes, sign me up. That would be incredible. But they don't always think through the implications, which is as your company grows, it fundamentally changes. A one-person company is totally different than a 10-person company. A 10-person company is totally different from a 100-person company, and so on. When you're talking about this kind of blitzscaling growth, you're talking about multiple orders of magnitude of growth. And you, as the entrepreneur, have to be prepared along the way to be basically running a different company every year, maybe even every 6 months, if you're really going through the hypergrowth. And that's what trips people up. They think, I've figured out what works. Like they're in college. They're like, oh, I figured out what works. Now I'm a senior. Now everything's going great. I'm like, yeah. Blitzscaling is kind of like that, except you're changing your school, going from middle school to high school to college every 6 months, every 12 months. And so the ability to sort of figure it out and relax isn't there. You can't have senioritis. Guess what? There's always another challenge around the corner. So you have to not be content to rest on your laurels. You have to have this driving ambition and this willingness to keep learning and to keep overcoming these challenges. Because while this rapid growth is incredible and it means you're winning, it also brings its own set of problems.
Yep. Well, Chris, it was great talking to you. I appreciate very much your time. Any questions I haven't asked?
I think that there is a very traditional thing when it comes to podcasts and video interviews, which is to make sure people know, hey, if you want to know more about Chris Ye, you want to follow along,
yeah.
how do you do that? And the answer is you can very easily find me pretty much everywhere, just as Chris Ye, CHRISYEH. But if you want a pointer, you can always go to chrisyeh.com, CHRISYEH.com, and you'll find all the information that you could ever want about Chris Ye. Of course, you could also ask AI, but I got to warn you, AI is often wrong.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I
My
wish you all
pleasure.
the best. And thank you very much for being my guest.
It has been an honor. I'd be happy to come back anytime.